This is sentence types. As you view the video, make sure you're taking notes and be ready to identify these different sentence types in class tomorrow. Looking at the 4 sentences here, they all have similar information, but each sentence adds a little bit more information and we have a different arrangement of the information. So if you look at those 4 sentences, Helen swims, and Jennifer dives. While Helen swims, Jennifer dives. While Helen swims, Jennifer dives, and their mom watches them. While they're a little bit similar, there are definite differences there, and that's from the type of sentences that they are. Each one is a different sentence type. There's a couple terms that we need to review before we move on. The subject, remember that's the person or object performing the verb in the sentence. It's the main noun of the sentence. So in the sentence, the young girl dives into the water. The young girl is the subject. That's the person performing the action. The predicate part of the sentence is the verb part. So the same sentence, the young girl dives into the water. Dives is the simple predicate, it's just the verb. Dives into the water is the verb phrase, it all goes together. A phrase, remember, is a group of words that go together. We could have a noun phrase, like the young girl, or a prepositional phrase, into the water. A clause is fairly similar to a phrase in that it's the group of words that go together, but what's different is it has both a subject and a verb. If we have an independent clause, that can stand alone as a sentence. So the young girl dives into the water. We have both a subject, girl, and dives, verb. So it's a clause, but it's an independent clause because it can be a sentence. A dependent clause also has a subject and a verb, but cannot stand alone as a sentence. It's either missing something or it has something that's preventing it from being a complete sentence. So we have as the young girl dives. Again, our subject is girl and dives is the verb. But because we have that adverb as, there's something else going on. So as the young girl dives, and if we would stop there, it wouldn't make sense. We need something more to complete that sentence. So make sure you have these terms written down in your notebook before moving on. Now we're going to go over the types of sentences, and there's 4 types we're going to look at. The first is simple, and that's just one independent clause. So the example from the first slide, Helen swims. We have a subject and we have a verb. It stands alone as a sentence. The second type is compound, and that is 2 independent clauses, and we join them together with either a semicolon or a coordinating conjunction. And remember those fanboys is the mnemonic device for remembering them. So and, but, for, or, no, so, yet. So Helen swims and Jennifer dives is the example. We have one independent clause here with Helen swims, and the second independent clause is Jennifer dives with the comma and a coordinating conjunction there. In the complex sentence, we have one independent clause and one dependent clause. So the example, while Helen swims, Jennifer dives. The dependent clause is while Helen swims. The independent clause is Jennifer dives. And the last sentence type is compound complex, and basically that just combines the definitions of compound and the complex sentences. So we have 2 or more independent clauses, and we have at least one dependent clause. So for a compound complex, we need to have at least 3 clauses. In the example, while Helen swims, Jennifer dives, and their mom watches them. While Helen swims is the dependent clause, Jennifer dives is an independent clause, and we have the last independent clause as their mom watches them. When we look at compound complex or compound sentences, we ignore that comma and the coordinating conjunction to determine if it's an independent or dependent clause. Here are a couple steps that you can follow to help you determine the sentence type. First, you want to identify all subjects and verbs in the sentence. Second, you want to go back and look, are those clauses independent or dependent clauses? Some hints, you can look for adverbs to identify dependent clauses. They typically start with an adverb, but not always. And if you are looking for the comma and the fanboys as well, typically that will clue you in. Then you want to count each type of clause and determine the sentence type. So if you like math, there's a couple addition formulas, and that's an additive property. It doesn't matter what order the clauses come in. If they have those clauses, that determines the sentence type. So again, simple is one independent clause. Compound is two independent clauses with a semicolon or a fanboy. Complex, we have a dependent plus an independent clause. And in compound complex, we have at least two independent clauses and at least one dependent clause. So we're going to look at some examples together. We have 4 sentences here, so what I want you to do is copy them down into your notebook and try to label the clauses and sentence types on your own. So you want to pause the video now and go ahead and do that. When you're finished, push play and we'll go over the answers. Alright class, our first sentence is when Marcia was treasurer of her class last year, she was also president. So the first thing we want to do is find all the subjects and verbs. So here I have a noun, Marcia, or subject. So Marcia was. Then down here I have another subject verb, she was. You need to pay attention to those adverbs like when. So here, if I draw my line here, when Marcia was treasurer of her class last year, this is a dependent clause. It has a subject and a verb, but it starts with an adverb. It does not express a complete thought. In the second part, she was also president. That could stand alone, so that's an independent clause, which means this is a complex sentence because I have my dependent clause and an independent clause. The second sentence is my brother bought a calculator and he has made fewer mistakes on his math homework. So again, we want to find all the subjects and verbs. So my brother bought a calculator. Brother bought, that's one verb. Remember when we see those commas, we want to draw a line. That's usually a clue of the type of clause. He has made, so subject, he has made fewer mistakes on his math homework. So I have 2 subject and verb combinations. I need to decide, are they independent or dependent clauses? So the first one, my brother bought a calculator. That's an independent clause that could stand alone as a sentence. Remember when we see one of those fanboys, the coordinating conjunctions, we want to ignore it. He has made fewer mistakes on his math homework. That's another independent clause. It could be a sentence. So because we have this comma and fanboy combination, coordinating conjunction, along with 2 independent clauses, it means that this is a compound sentence. Our third sentence here is a question, so we don't want to get tripped up by that. Do you know the date of our science exam? We look at questions the same way. So we want to identify the verb, and this is what gets tricky. Sometimes our verb gets split up when we're asking a question. So do know is the verb. You, remember, answers the who. So we have do you know is the subject and verb, the date of our science exam. This is just extra information. We have a prepositional phrase here. This is one independent clause. It stands alone as a sentence. So this would just be a simple sentence. Okay, so again, one independent clause, simple sentence. In our last sentence, we're back with Marcia. So Marcia, who is my sister, was treasurer of her class last year. This year, she is president. So let's go through. We have some commas here. So I'm going to draw my lines to kind of divide that up. And I'm also noticing the semicolon, so I'm going to draw my line to see those divisions. And I'm not going to start at the very beginning for this one because I see I'm kind of interrupted here. So who is my sister? This is our restrictive clause, or I'm sorry, non-restrictive clause set off by commas. It's giving us extra information about Marcia. So here, who is my sister can't stand alone as a sentence. So that's a dependent clause, one subject verb. Now I'm going to go back here and I have to join these two parts up together. Marcia was treasurer of her class last year. Marcia's the subject. This is a linking verb, was, links Marcia to treasurer. So that's an independent clause. Then I look here after the semicolon. This year, she is president. She is, this is another linking verb, remember? So I have another independent clause. That could be a sentence. So I have two independent clauses plus one dependent. This is a compound complex. Remember, the compound complex is just that. It combines the compound sentence, which is two independent clauses, with a complex, which is the dependent and independent clause. And remember, these could come in any order. We could have the dependent clause at the end. It doesn't matter, but if I have these elements, that's what makes it the compound complex sentence. All right, so now you should have a basic understanding of the four sentence types, which again were simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. Tomorrow in class, we'll be practicing labeling those parts of the sentence as well as the sentence types. And the reason that this is important is in your writing, you want to use a variety of the types to add style. If you only use simple sentences, your writing would be extremely boring. But if you have this variety, it can help you explain your information, put ideas together, and help your readers understand the main points of your essay.